believe that the role of the artist is to help us imagine the world that we may not currently live in. I believe the role of the artist is to give us some sense of deep appeasement when we're suffering and we're trying to visualize a new world. I think the role of the artist is truly the individual inside of the collective that reminds us what's possible.
Hey y'all, welcome to The Art Rebellion, a platform and interview series dedicated to activist art. My name is Makeda, and in this interview, I'm talking with Patrisse Cullors, an artist and the co-founder of the Black Lives Matter Global Network. This interview is really special to me. I first interviewed Patrisse when I was a journalist at the LA Times a few years ago, and thinking about Patrisse's work and the intersection of art and activism and how essential artists are in so many of our social movements, this is what inspired me to create the Art Rebellion in the first place. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy. It's so great to see you and talk to you again after it's been a couple years.
Yeah.
And so, trying to kind of to get started with everything, I think so many people know you as the co-founder of the Black Lives Matter movement and know your work in that space. But I'd love for you to introduce yourself as an artist and talk about how you define your art practice.
Well, it's very good to see you. It's been a long time. You're also one of my favorite journalists,
Oh, thank you.
especially in relationship to art. So grateful for everything you've written, and specifically the work you followed for in my career, and that really centered around art and activism. So just want to thank you for that. Yeah, I'm an artist, and I've always been an artist. I've been an artist since I was a small child. In fact, I remember taking my first dance class when I was 11 years old. My great grandmother used to always tell me, she named me as an artist, and I really that first dance class like changed my life, changed how I understood myself as well as dance and my relationship to the world. My work is really about healing and resilience for Black people specifically and Black women. And I deeply believe in creating opportunities through art to give people more space to transform, to heal, to be connected to themselves and connected to their humanity and all living beings. Um, I'm worried about the world. And I'm hoping as an artist that I can offer some space and spaciousness so that people can see themselves as a part of a movement that is about healing.
And in your experiences, why do artists matter in movements, and what role can artists play in these movements for like equal rights and justice and liberation and that kind of thing?
I think a lot about the Black arts movement, the Chicano arts movement. I think a lot about the artists who help propel and help shape a new world. I believe that the role of the artist is to help us imagine the world that we may not currently live in. I believe the role of the artist is to give us some sense of deep appeasement when we're suffering and we're trying to visualize a new world. I think the role of the artist is truly the individual inside of the collective that reminds us what's possible.
And yeah, how do you think artists can use their like toolbox or their skills to aid in movements?
Well, in one way, I think the individual art practice is important to be an anchor for communities, especially communities who've been marginalized and communities who've not been able to see how beautiful and powerful they are. I think a lot about some Everything's work and the role of, Lauren Halsey and the role of art, and bringing South Central into places like the Met. But I also think the role of art institutions is incredibly important. I helped co-found an organization called the Crenshaw Dairy Mart alongside Ali Ressa Doris and Noe Olivas. Our executive director is Ashley Blakeney. And the work that we're doing is trying to create an institution that helps shift the artist economy. I'm deeply worried about the ways in which Black artists specifically are exploited inside of the art world, how we are undermined, how we end up kind of being positioned against the greater good sometimes. And so I believe art institutions play a particular role in helping shape the art economy. And so the work at the Crenshaw Dairy Mart has been to do that. We launched a fellowship last year, that it was called CDM Face, and we were looking at abolition and the advancement of the creative economy. We worked with three Inglewood-based artists who largely would not be inside of institutions, would not be seen for their work and their art, but we did see them and we wanted to help propel them into the art world. And we were able to provide healthcare. I know that should not be a revolutionary act, but it is.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a role that the individual artist plays as in our practice. So for me, my practice is at the intersection of abolition and spirit, and really trying to propel those values forward through my artwork. And then I think the art institutions, we're a baby at the Crenshaw Dairy Mart. You know, we're only really 3 years old, but there's legacy institutions that it is their job to help propel change and to shift how our economy relates to art and artistry in this country.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I actually wasn't aware that you were doing work around the creative economy. I have a project around artist pay, and so I'm like also really interested in these issues. I trying to think of what the question would be, but I'm just like so excited that you're doing work around like what you said about healthcare. It's sad that that is even like so not normal.
Right.
Do you have ideas about how we can shift the conversation in this country so that artists and particularly Black artists are valued and have a chance at making a living wage and being able to thrive and that kind of thing?
Yes, I do. I have lots of thoughts. um, so there's like a few players here that need to be pushed and challenged. Um, Player number one is the collector. The collector is often given way too much power when it comes to the role of the artist. And so the collector needs to relinquish that power, the role of the collector. Um, what does it mean when a collector can buy tons of Black art at a lower discount and then resell it decades later, and that artist does not receive any pay? That doesn't exist in the world of entertainment. An actor or a director or a creative director can produce something, put it on a network, and they'll see those residuals years later. I mean, it's literally why our union, I'm a WGA member, went to bat for writers, and why SAG, which is I'm also part of that union, went to bat for actors, because we needed better pay for those residuals, for that work that we did, that labor that gets seen over and over again. We need that for fine artists. We need to be able to know that what we make now that may be worth tons of money later will not be exploited. Our labor won't be exploited, because what happens when Black artists in particular, their works make all this money, they may be gone and their family gets nothing. It's just another form of an economy that keeps Black folks' inability to have any sort of generational wealth. So I think that's like number one, the collector. Number two, gallerist. If you are going to be working with artists and if you are supposed to be supporting the art economy, let's get some more regulations. We don't have any gallerists. It's the wild, wild west in a gallery. So, I think the gallerist also needs to fight for the artist in that way. Will you, gallerist, listen to the demands of artists? And then I think the museum plays a critical role in this larger conversation, whether it's about repatriation of art objects that were stolen, or it's about supporting artists who are challenging what's happening right now inside of Israel and Palestine. How devastating that you, as an artist, can't speak up for fear of being ousted and for fear of having shows canceled. That is a dangerous line to toe when we're supposed to live inside a democracy.
Yeah, thank you for kind of expanding on that. And kind of going back to your own art practice, I'd love to hear you talk about what you've been working on this year. I know there was the performance disruption at Freeze, and you have a show at the Fowler, and so many other things that you're working on. Would love to hear what you're doing and like what your inspiration points were.
Sure, yeah. I opened up this year with a show at CDM at the Crenshaw Dairy Mart. I partnered with Rita Nazarino out of the Philippines, where I developed a beautiful bag called the North Star bag. And on the back of the leather flap, I licensed a poem from Nisi Berry, who is a poet, a formerly incarcerated Black woman who wrote this gorgeous poem about the North Star, about abolition. And I was really looking at wanting to evolve the conversation around Black women who are incarcerated, who are also artists, and the work that they do and the role they play in this fight for abolition. And Vogue Philippines featured that bag and that work, and it was just such a powerful opportunity to share with the community both this beautiful visual representation of the North Star and to partner with Rita and her company and to bring Nisi in, all of us who are queer women of color. And then after that, I disrupted Freeze. And a response to, it's been a long response. We've been trying to connect with the Freeze leadership for a long time and haven't heard back from them since they put on Freeze in Beverly Hills. And the Crenshaw Dairy Mart leadership wrote a really beautiful call-in letter. Hey, you're in LA. We'd love to meet with you. Here are some issues with having Freeze in Beverly Hills. And then the leadership just never responded to us. They said, "Oh, we reread this. We thank you. We'll respond." And years later, we haven't responded. And my cousin was killed just down the street, 7 minutes away from Santa Monica, the Santa Monica hangar. And a group of us marched from where he was killed by LAPD and into Freeze, where we shared the names of people who had been killed at the hands of the state. Really trying to challenge the art community to be more in connection to issues that are happening, issues like police violence. And then in March, I launched a show alongside Noe Olivas called Freedom Portals, where I used textile, mud cloth, and cowrie shells and etched in some of the sacred Odu symbols that come from the tradition I practice, which is Ifa, and now represented by Charlie James Gallery after that show. And then I have been spending the last 2 years preparing for my first museum exhibition, which is up right now at the Fowler Museum and closes June 2nd of next year, in which it looks at 100 objects from the Fowler's collection of Yoruba objects from Nigeria, Brazil, and Cuba. And they asked me to be the contemporary artist. And in that show, I present a 14-minute short that I filmed in Zihuatanejo, Mexico, and directed by Maxwell Ade, and the cinematography was by Sam Chatterjee. And this just really kind of meditative, silent, beautiful display of four of the Orisha. And then in the second room is an art installation of four of the Orisha that were featured in the short video piece using those garments for the installation. And then I have 4 textile pieces that are a part of the continued work that I did earlier this year at Charlie James Gallery. So that show is very meaningful for me. It's really about my spiritual practice and really wanting to honor the Orisha in a way that gives them a lot of spaciousness. In the artist statement, I talk about the challenge to Christian supremacy, and really using this piece as a way to challenge the really awful ways Christian supremacy has demonized African traditions in particular.
And how do you hope people engage with the exhibit, or what do you want them to take away from their experience there?
I want people to enter into that exhibition and just feel held and seen. Um, both the rooms, where my rooms are, where my pieces are, they're really just an opportunity for people to connect and feel safe and to feel present with their own healing, with their own suffering, with their own needs. I really see it as like both of them as meditative spaces.
Yeah, I know a lot of your work touches on healing, and I know the work that you do is also really heavy. And a lot of, I'm sure, artists who work in the similar space deal with really heavy and kind of like soul, I don't want to say soul crushing, but just really difficult topics. Like, I'm wondering how you find like light and joy within your practice. Yeah.
So I actually have like made it a deep point in my practice to make things really beautiful because they make me happy. Um, both all the pieces. I didn't state, which is really important. The third element of the exhibition is a soundscape. I often use soundscapes for my works, and I worked with Twin Towers, which is a group of 2 twins, or one set of twins,
Okay.
Tyreek and Garfield, who work on these really beautiful soundscapes, and we used a lot of solfeggio sounds and lots of just like water and elements. Alongside, I asked the community to send me prayers, Ifa and Yoruba, and prayers around our practice. We say these morning prayers every 5 days. And so I received all these prayers from people, and the twins co produced this track with me. And I want to make art that makes people feel like they can still live, that they could survive, that they're resilient. I want to make art that makes people feel dedicated to something larger than themselves. And my work is often heavy subjects, but also important and necessary subjects that are then made really beautiful, so people can feel like they can be with the work and take a lot of time with the work.
And I'm curious how being an artist has influenced or shown up in your organizing work. And I know being an artist is also like they're really intertwined, but yeah, I'm curious if you could speak to that, like how the way you think, or yeah, how you feel like being an artist shows up in other ways.
Mm. Art informs everything that I do. There is a level of creativity and innovation that drives me in any project I work on, because otherwise, like if I thought there was only one way to do things or one orientation, I think I would be incredibly depressed and bored with my life and with the work that I'm doing. And so art is, to me, it's the innovation, it's the approach of like innovating. It's believing that more is possible. Art is like coming from an art practice and being inside other parts of my world also allows me to, uh, I think, be a bridger to sometimes really difficult topics, to have a lot more compassion. I feel like artists have a lot of compassion and empathy. We can hold a lot. Um, and I think, especially in these times, that's our work and role, to build coalitions, to hold the difficult, to help translate it for people, and to be visionaries to transform society's conditions so that we can live in the places that we deserve, live in the ways that we deserve.
Right. You mentioned like the genocide in Gaza and Palestine and how you're starting to think about like how you might approach that ongoing like horrific situation. Could you talk about what you're thinking or how you feel about that?
Absolutely. I feel a lot of complicated things about what's happening right now. A lot of devastation, a lot of sadness. I am a firm believer that people deserve to live in peace, live without the fear and terror of being persecuted. Um, Two things are happening for me. One is a deep desire for the collective humanity to be seen. Um, I know that it's complicated in this country as we see the rise of both anti Semitism and Islamophobia. And it creates this tension that truly shouldn't exist. We should be able to fight for people's right to live full, healthy lives. And I, you know, I want to challenge any of us who are unable to believe that. I've been reading a lot of MLK lately. I read his, and I encourage folks to do it. I read his Beyond Silence speech when he came out against the war in Vietnam. And he talked about a radical love that is needed right now. And he said, not emotional bosh, not a love that is about allowing for militaries to control whole peoples, not a love that is, um, you know, only for your own people and own community, but a radical love that calls us all in to show up for the breadth of humanity. And that's what I'm praying for, wishing for, and that's what I'm saying everywhere I go right now.
Can you talk about what else you're working on or what's next or what you hope for your own practice or the Crenshaw Dairy Mart or any big projects that are coming up?
Yeah. Well, the good news is for the rest of this exhibition at the Fowler, I'm their artist in residency. So I am programming all of their programs from January to June and bringing in a lot of community members to talk about the role of Orisha in their life, the role of healing in their life. And that's been super exciting to do that program and to bring people in and call people in to help just elevate these conversations. Um, and then next year, I have my first solo show at Charlie James Gallery in June of next year. So working on that, I'm working on I'm going to be in a show in February at the Canada Gallery and a group show. And I am working on launching two educational series. One is based off of my book that I launched last year, the Abolitionist Handbook 12 Steps to Changing Yourself in the World. I am launching an educational series called Abolition Is. And it's going to be an online program working with communities who want to practice abolition inside your institution, but also practice abolition inside your relationships, your interpersonal relationships, your family relationships. I think right now, given how divisive what's happening in Israel Palestine is for so many communities, we need to practice something different. We need to practice being in relationship with each other. I was able to visit Rwanda a couple times last year, and it was really powerful. I spent time with the artist, and it was really, you know, these people lived through a genocide and then had to live amongst the people who were part of the genocide. And figuring out how to do that is so incredibly difficult and painful. And we're gonna have to do that. We're gonna have to do that now. We can't block everybody. We can't cut everybody off. So what does transformative justice look like in this moment? What does it look like to be engaged in this moment? So I'm thinking a lot about that and want to use this book and this series to do that. And I'm working alongside Transformative Programs, which is an amazing online community that has been pushing for a lot of different types of healing modalities that are not just, a part of the sort of luxury white woman brand, but looking at a politicized way to talk about healing that keeps us engaged with each other and alongside each other. And then I'm launching a meditation series called Abolitionist Meditations. I did a bunch of those already this year, just kind of testing them out on Instagram, and they did really, really well. And so I'm looking at how to challenge the world of healing that is often disconnected from what's happening in the real world, um, and bring us into an abolitionist vision of our future. I believe many of the world problems wouldn't be happening if we had an abolitionist culture here in the US and abroad.
Cool. And I think my final question, I'm just curious, if you could talk about when you started leaning more into your art practice, like what kind of led to that, and how, yeah, I'm sure you've had a lot of responses, but like how you feel in this moment about your work and your practice as an artist.
Some of us who are and spent a lot of time inside movement and activism spaces are artists. A lot of us, actually. And our art was neglected because there was something that we felt was more urgent. The way we were to be used was more urgent, and during that time, I've always used my art that it was always been at the center of my own personal practice, but not necessarily so public facing. And in 2017, I went back to art school. My art mentor, Suzanne Lacey, really pressured me to go back to art school. And that was the moment when I realized, oh, I've been neglecting this thing that is actually very core to who I am. And making became really important for my legacy and for how I show up in the world. And I would say in 2017, that became very clear. And launching my thesis, which you helped launch when you were at the LA Times. You launched it at the LA Times. I think that show and that performance and that experience was so deeply transformative for me and the people who showed up that I realized that I was cheating myself and the community by not making art as one of my primary priorities, and using it and being a vessel for the work. And it's been powerful to spend, especially this year, um, as focusing on my fine art and entertainment work. There's a ton of entertainment work that I can't talk about that is coming out next year too. So hopefully we can have another conversation about that when that happens. But I would say that the core of of what I'm bringing to the world now is at the intersection of fine art and entertainment, and it's really pushing the values of abolition through those spaces. And it's been so transformative for me. For me, it's been so powerful as a Black queer woman. It's been so transformative and healing for me as a Black queer woman who was raised poor to prioritize my joy and healing, and that comes through art. And that has been deeply revelatory for me.
Great. Were there any other things that you wanted to add that I didn't ask you about, or yeah, anything
Oh,
else? Yeah.
two things that I'd love to share for folks to visit. Kershaw Dairy Mart co-curated a show at the Long Beach Museum of Art called Ordinary People, and it is looking at the last decade of artwork and art practice that happened um, towards an abolitionist future in Los Angeles, as many of us challenged the jail plan that was going to be implemented. So that's up right now, and it's so beautiful. Carla Contemporary Art Review did a beautiful review of the show. It's not just us, it's five other organizations that were invited to share artwork that are at the intersection of abolition and activism and art. The second thing is that the Crenshaw Dairy Mart is going to be a participating organization in PST next year. So it's really exciting.
Cool. That's great.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for your time today. I so appreciate talking to you. Yeah, really thankful for your time.